Howdy, howdy, and welcome back. It's another Workshop Wednesday. Today we're talking about how to tell if your Facebook ads are really working. We'll dive more into that in just a few minutes. My name is Chris Mercer. Welcome. I do go by Mercer, and I am the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io. And maybe you came across some of our podcasts and talks that we have done. Maybe you've come across some of the platforms that we work with, including Digital Marketer, CXL Institute, Social Media Examiner, maybe even Measure Summit more recently, or maybe you are already a member over at measurementmarketing.io. However you found us, welcome. We are happy to have you here for Workshop Wednesday. Our job is to help people like you learn how to use analytics and Tag Manager and Data Studio, even things like Facebook Analytics, in order to figure out what's working and what's not. And we do that by using the measurement marketing framework. Now we're going to cover this. We cover this each Workshop Wednesday because it is important to make sure you're using a framework for your analytics, because it will help make things just make them a lot more sense. You pull a lot more insights from your information. It starts with planning, which is figuring out what your questions are, what the information is. You need to answer the questions. What actions will you take based upon the answers you get? All that sort of stuff. Now, in what we're talking about today around your, trying to figure out if Facebook ads are really working the way you think they're working and all that fun stuff, planning is important. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Building, we will absolutely talk about that, because you're going to have to put Facebook pixels on your pages and figure that stuff out. Now, we're not going to go into a deep dive on that today, because this is a strategy session. This is for those of you who are more on the strategy side of things, and you may not be the one who's implementing the builds, but it's important that you understand what you need to talk about when it comes to your implementation team, specifically to answering around if Facebook's working or not. Reporting is an obvious one, because you can't just trust Facebook's ads manager. I would love to, but you can't just do that, because it's Facebook's version of the truth, and you need to use something like analytics and other platforms to be able to figure that out. And of course, once you know how things work, you can begin to forecast and stop looking back in your data to find out what just happened and start asking the question, did this work like it was supposed to? Which you can absolutely do when it comes to forecasting. And of course, when you're doing that, you measure against your forecasts, and that will tell you where you should optimize and where you shouldn't. And it'll be really obvious on how you do that once you get to that stage. So that's the framework. Now, with all of these workshops, I want to focus on one new thing, one new idea, maybe something you've heard just slightly different, or maybe just a new skill set that you can practice and pick up. Put those to the test first, build those skills, then come back and watch this again, and you'll pick up another new one thing. The reason we ask you to do this is because there's so much sometimes that's covered in these workshops that it can be confusing and overwhelming if you try to hang on to every single thing that's covered. So just focus on the one thing where you go, okay, cool, that's my one thing. I'm going to go practice that. Then I'll come back, pick up another one thing later on. That's why we make these publicly available. All right, let's go ahead and get started, shall we? Strategy session. How to tell if your Facebook ads are really working. Now, we are going to go ahead and dive right into this. And this is really one of those things, again, because this is a strategy session, we're going to start with sort of a how to think this thing through, because that's what this is all about. When you understand how things work, how the platforms work and everything else, it can be a little bit easier to actually build a strategy and actually work with your implementation team to improve your reports that you're getting, so you can actually answer questions like, my Facebook really doing what Facebook says it's doing? And everything that we're going to talk about today, and this is why I have this little Google Ads logo on here as well, is because it applies to all traffic sources. Like, I put in the title of this Facebook because that's what people are doing a lot of, and that's the question they mostly ask. But insert any traffic source. So you can say, how's my email working? How are my Google Ads working? How's my Facebook working? That's what we're going to talk about today, is figuring that stuff out. And it starts by understanding how these platforms are working kind of on their own, and then how they work together and how we can figure out the difference between the two. So we're going to run through a little scenario here that probably has happened to you more than a few times. And we're going to start with Facebook. So we've got Facebook here. And let's say you're running an ads campaign. And what typically happens is you run a campaign, and let's say you've got, I'll just kind of use this over here, a little image. We're going to call this, like, we send it to the blog post. It's just a little hypothetical. And then you've got another campaign that retargets them, and it brings them back a little bit later. And this is for, some sort of opt-in offer that you might have, some sort of lead capture or something like that. They sign up for your guide or your video series or ebook, whatever the thing is. And then ultimately they purchase, right? They come back later and then they purchase. And when you have something that's kind of similar to this, and let's say you're running Facebook traffic, what tends to happen is you run Facebook traffic to the blog post. And some of you, that's all you're doing. You're just running it to get that content out there, right? Get them to the blog post, and the blog post is designed to get them to opt in. And then hopefully when they opt in, they'll see the offer and they'll buy. And sometimes something like this, and I'm going to zoom out just a little bit because I'm going to move these out of the way here just so we can focus on Facebook in its entirety. So we'll say this is just Facebook. Sometimes this all happens in the same session, what they call the same visit. So I'm going to call that day 0 in this particular case. Bring that up so you can see like day 0, right? Visit number 1, where they come to see the blog post and they opt in and they purchase on the same visit. At that point, Facebook gets credit for that. And that would be correct. That's exactly what happened. Facebook caused the visit to happen. Let me zoom out just a little bit here. So Facebook would have caused that visit to happen. And because it caused the visit to happen, it gets credit for everything that happened during that visit. Right? So we see that. And that's actually super easy to figure out. That's not why we're here today, because this is where Facebook would say, hey, I just caused a sale and maybe a lead, if that's the kind of pixel that you're firing back. And Google Analytics would say, hey, Facebook just caused a sale or a lead, right? And it's all happening same session. Super easy. Both those things would agree. The challenge is when you have multiple traffic sources, of which case most of us probably do. At least to the point where maybe you have email coming in. And I'm going to bring email up at the top here because this is often the scenario is Facebook has blog posts and opt-ins. And then what happens is email is really designed to get the purchase. And so what will happen is your Facebook ads are coming down here to get blog posts and opt-in leads. Again, I'm saying maybe you've got like a content marketing play to introduce them to your brand. And then maybe you've got a retargeting campaign that retargets those people to get them to opt in. Sometimes it's just this, just where, somebody's just sending to an opt-in. But we're going to say it's a little complicated. We're going to put these couple steps in. Hopefully you're doing something like this to introduce them to your brand. And so when you go back and you ask Facebook, hey, how many ads or how many purchases did I sell on this ad? On day 0, on that first day, it's not going to have any. But all of a sudden, by day 7, this fires as a purchase pixel. And it gets reported back that Facebook, now again, this is Facebook's version of the truth. In your ads manager, maybe when you're talking to your Facebook vendors will say, hey, guess what? Facebook just did all this cool stuff, right? Facebook is now in charge, or is the thing that caused all of this. So we sort of give credit to Facebook for all of these, the purchase, the blog post, the opt-ins, it's doing all the work. But then when you go to Google Analytics, it doesn't say that. Google Analytics says, well, Facebook did some of the work. Facebook did these things, right? It did the blog post. It got maybe an opt-in because they happened in this visit, but email is what caused the purchase. And again, that's technically true, right? That's exactly what happened. Email was sent. It sent them to the page in a little hypothetical marketing journey here, and it calls the purchase on the second visit, right? Days after Facebook. But because it's with the attribution window, right? And this is something in Facebook terms. So you can define how long this ad gets credit for. And by default, Facebook will claim credit for 28 days after that ad was clicked on. So what will happen is Facebook's claiming credit for everything that's happening during all of these visits, trying to associate it back to this ad. And again, sometimes that's useful. But that's why things don't work all the time. That's why things don't agree all the time. We shouldn't say they don't work. It's because they don't agree. And this is where you start seeing things like Facebook telling you, hey, you're causing an incredibly large amount of sales to come through. And by you, I mean Facebook. Facebook's causing a bunch of sales to come through. And let's face it, if we all had the money that Facebook said we made, we'd all be millionaires. But that's not the case, right? A lot of times Facebook feels like it's over-reporting. Facebook feels like it's really aggressive at claiming credit for anything that it can. And kind of it is. Because what will happen is these wide open attribution windows where you have an attribution window that says, okay, for a month, this ad, whatever this one little ad was, for a month, it's going to get whatever credit it can. Well, if you're sending a ton of emails to your list and your list is buying from those emails, anything that Facebook can source back to those ads, it's going to. And that's where you start to get a version of the truth, while not technically untrue, maybe isn't all that useful. And it gets really, really hard to figure out what exactly is Facebook doing for me versus what is Facebook claiming credit for. And maybe it's not causing all these sales, at least not directly. And this is where, as a strategist, somebody in your company who's really, really responsible for figuring out what actions to take and how to guide the spend and what the messaging needs to be and whatever else you're doing at your organization, you need to know how these things work together, how to play these things off. So what we're going to talk about is how to sort of rethink this because it blurs the lines when you have these things and they start claiming credit and everything else. So one of the things that I would recommend is as you're coming through here, you shorten the attribution window, which means you tell Facebook, listen, I don't want you claiming credit for an ad click that's, if you think about it, is the ad itself really designed to work 28 days later? No, it's probably not. So you shorten that attribution window and you tell Facebook, I don't need you claiming credit on every click for the next 28 days because that's not how it's designed to work. And this goes a little bit into our forecasting pillar that we talk about here at measuremarketing.io, where we say, okay, you've got a forecast. You have to start to say, here's how this thing is supposed to work, and you measure against your forecast. So how is Facebook supposed to work? So what you do is you say, okay, I'm going to tighten up the window. You're talking to your vendors and have them do this. I'm going to design the ad so that I can measure if it's achieving the thing I want it to achieve. And what might that be? Well, this first stage might be, and we've kind of mentioned it before a little bit here. So this first stage might be awareness. And that's what it's designed to do. It's just designed to get your brand out in front of somebody. And then maybe after that, it's designed to engage. So we're going to paste in engagement here. And then maybe after that engaging step, then it's designed ultimately that in their journey, they're going to purchase or invest or whatever the thing is that they're going to try to do for your brand. Let's just assume that's kind of a 3-step journey where you make them aware of your brand, they engage with your brand, they ultimately purchase or invest with your brand, whatever that looks like for you. So in that case, what starts happening, I'll move the purchase over here for a moment, is you might have a series of blog posts that you're sending Facebook traffic to, and those are UTM. Remember, if UTM doesn't make sense to you right now, if you're not sure what that is, it's just a way of tracking your traffic. All of your traffic vendors will know this. Whoever's responsible for your implementation will absolutely know this, and you should too. So you need to know what UTMs are and how they work because you have to structure these things together. You have to coordinate what your traffic tags are. But basically, all they do is they tell Google Analytics what's happening. They tell Google Analytics where that traffic came from, where that visitor, where that user just came from. So you would UTM it to say, okay, it came from Facebook, and the purpose is awareness. And you set a goal in Google Analytics for awareness, not for a purchase. Like if they purchase, it's a happy accident. It's not what it's designed to do. It's just designed to get them aware. Then there's a whole other set of ads whose job it is to get them to engage. And maybe if we're keeping just with Facebook, there's a whole other set of ads that maybe retargets people and gets them to try to purchase. But it's not purchase anytime in the next month because I've never seen an ad that is designed to do that. I've never seen an ad that says, click on this ad, take advantage of this offer sometime over the next few weeks. That's not a thing. It is designed to get you to take an action within hours at best, in a lot of cases, within hours and really within minutes in most cases, right? You click on the ad and those pages that you land on from a marketing ad, they're designed to get you to do the thing you just clicked on. It's not, let's think about this for weeks and then maybe you'll come back to it. No ad works like that. So you tighten up your attribution windows and you start really better defining how Facebook is supposed to be working. And so this Facebook ad is designed to get awareness. This Facebook ad is designed to get engagement, get them to become a lead, right? Move them further down the journey. This set of Facebook ads is designed to purchase. And the beauty of this is what will happen is you can start bringing in other traffic sources using the same technique. So maybe we bring in our Google ads as well here. Let's hypothetically say you're using Google ads too. So what would happen is maybe you've got Facebook ads whose job it is to make people aware of blog posts, and then you retarget through Facebook and try to get them to opt in, and you're retargeting that list with Google ads as well to get them to try to opt in. And then maybe once they opt in, you retarget them with Facebook traffic, and you're also sending emails to get them to purchase. Well, what happens is when you have a system like this, where you have defined what the point of the traffic is, so this Facebook ad is supposed to achieve this specific result. Again, not a purchase. That's where things go wonky, and that's where things get screwed up. People try too often to try to always tie it down to the purchase. And yes, that's an important result, but so are these little how steps along the way. You have to have these too. It's what we call results and how here. So you have to know what your end result is. Of course, no one's saying don't track that. But you can't just skip over everything else because that is where you lose the story. And you start to not know how Facebook is really working for you because you're just too busy trying to track to the purchase. And what happens is if somebody clicks on the ad and then 28 days later send an email or 27 days later send an email, they purchase, then all of a sudden this ad gets credit, but it's not really because they clicked on the ad that caused the sale. It was the email that caused the sale. But the ad made them aware, and that is how Facebook is working for you. And you won't know that unless you tie your traffic results to very specific journey steps in that customer journey that you have in your sales pipeline, if you want to think about it like that. The different stages that a user has to go to as they move from a prospect who has no idea who you are to a repeat purchaser or somebody who's sharing your brand over and over again and telling others about you, right? And all the stages in between. This is just 3 of those stages where you say awareness, engagement, and purchase. But there's lots of different stages that your customers can go through. And you can set up goals in Google Analytics to track those individual stages. And then, again, you're going to UTM, you're going to very tightly define what this ad does. Like in our case, we do those in the UTM section called content. And I'll show you what this looks like in analytics in just a few minutes. So this is how we know that a specific Facebook ad, its job was to get awareness of a particular blog post or idea or something else, or a lead. We use it a lot for leads and toolbox memberships for us. And then ultimately for purchases, if we were doing that, we UTM them. So we tell Google Analytics, this is coming from Facebook. The point of this Facebook ad, it should be creating a lead. That's what I want you to judge it as, and that's what I want to know if it's doing or not. I don't care if it makes a purchase. If it does, that's awesome, but it's an accident. Right? It's just an added bonus, but it's not designed to make people purchase. There's a whole other set of Facebook ads whose job it is designed to people purchase. And of course, maybe I've got email, maybe even have Google ads coming in and doing that as well. So you can really more specifically define your machinery as to how your marketing is supposed to work together. And then you don't actually stop. You don't actually have to worry about asking that question of like, how is my Facebook ad? Why is Facebook telling me I made 1 million sales when in reality I only made 2? Like, yes, let's cover the basics. It could be an implementation problem. You might have that pixel firing way too often and it's just wrong. But I'm going to assume that you've covered that, right? Those are the basics. That's an obvious step. I probably should have said at the very beginning. Make sure your implementation's right. Make sure that you're not firing purchase pixels when somebody just looks at a sales page. I have seen that, by the way, a lot, where they were quote unquote selling a lot, but it's because their purchase pixel was firing when the sales page loaded, not when they actually purchased. So it's just, there's some things like that. So just take care of that low-hanging fruit. Make sure your setup is correct. But once you have that, what really kicks this off is the strategy has to change. And so you get very specific. What is this ad supposed to do in the customer journey? Yes, ultimately, it's going to cause a purchase. We all want that for sure. But what does this ad specifically do in that journey? Now, if it is to get a purchase, awesome. But a lot of times it's not. We're sending Facebook traffic to create leads or some sort of awareness with content marketing. And those, again, some people are going to buy, but it's not what it's designed to do. It's really designed to introduce them to your brand. So that's what you set as a goal. And that's how you judge your Facebook campaigns. And that way, what starts to happen is Facebook ads, because you'll send back pixels to say when this happens with custom conversions or something like that in Facebook, you can, and using Tag Manager, all the tools that we talk about in measurementmarketing.io, when you're doing, as a measurement marketer, you'll be using Tag Manager and Google Analytics and, placing your Facebook pixels and everything else. But what the beauty of doing this system is because all of a sudden Facebook ads starts telling kind of a similar story, not exact because they all measure in different ways, but generally speaking, Facebook ads starts to agree with Google Analytics, and you start to see a similar story, and they start to agree, and you start to go, okay, this is how my customer journey works. These are the different traffic sources that are good at causing these different stages of the customer journey to go forward. And instead of, worrying about purchases all the time, you're worrying about connecting the dots between the two. And you're actually worried about tracking that pipeline. And then you start to figure out what traffic source is really good at creating awareness, because maybe you've got a bunch of different ones. Maybe you're doing Google ads too. And you've got Google ads and Facebook kind of, cranking that stuff. And so you might find that Facebook is just much better. It's the winner when it comes to creating awareness. But maybe with, trial and effort coming in, you find that Google ads is really better at retargeting, and maybe email is the ultimate when it comes to getting people to purchase. And you can start to measure for this. And you start to realize like, okay, these are my big 3, right? These traffic sources, the Facebook to get them to be aware of our brand. And maybe Google ads is what I spend mostly to get them to opt in, and then email is what closes the deal. And you start to realize you can scale out this particular path because you realize this one doesn't work. There's all sorts of benefits to doing this. It is something that requires planning. This is what we talked about in our pillars. We start with planning. That's why we start with planning, because you need to think through, okay, how am I going to know in Google Analytics? If I go to Google Analytics and say, hey, Google, how is my Facebook ads working, right? That's too general of a question. Because really what should happen is that system, Google Analytics, is going, I don't know. What do you mean by work? When you say the ads are working, what do you mean working? And you would say, oh, well, what I really mean is how is Facebook working in order to create awareness of my brand? How is Facebook working in order to actually engage those users within my brand, where they're passing over an email and we're creating a conversation out with those users? How is Facebook when it comes to creating purchases directly? And Google Analytics will eventually start to tell you a story that might look like, hey, Facebook is really good at creating awareness with a blog post. It's not so good at creating leads. It ends up being Google ads. And then really the emails are what close them. But how do they even get into this audience in the first place? Because of Facebook. And now, if you're a Facebook vendor and you're trying to explain to your client why all the money they spend doesn't necessarily get attributed to Facebook, you can start to explain your story. You're part of the journey and say, well, listen, yeah, we're not designed to get purchases. Our job is to get awareness. And for every 100 people that become aware, maybe 30 of them opt in, and then maybe 5 of those purchase. But you wouldn't have those purchases or those opt-ins if it wasn't for Facebook creating awareness in the first place. And you can prove, especially if you're measuring for the goal and not just for the purchase all the time, because that's annoying trying to do that. It's fine if you want to, but you need to really focus on what's the exact first step. And the difference here is time. Purchase typically is way down the journey. There's a large element of time between the purchase and when the ad was clicked, and that's where things get confusing. The more time between the ad click itself and that end result that you're trying to get, the harder it is to attribute. That's just what's going to happen. So instead, you make something closer to time. You say, well, I can't really measure for a purchase years later, right, or weeks later, but I can measure for awareness. I can see if Facebook made somebody aware, where maybe they stayed on the page for at least 10 seconds, like something like that. Not just when the page loaded, but when they did something. They actually spent at least 10 seconds on the page, something very simple to set up with Tag Manager. Then you fire back a pixel to Facebook and you go, cool, mission accomplished. These sets of ads created that awareness. Now let's move on and create new sets of ads that bring in leads, etc. So let me show you in Google Analytics, because this is kind of the rough idea of how this is. Now, we'll say 2 things. If you're watching this and you need help on it, if you're a Measurement Marketing Academy member, you've got Ask an Instructor support, where you can reach out to our instructors and explain, okay, here's our traffic sources, here's what our customer journey is, here's how we currently have them UTM'd, or here's the questions we're trying to answer, how do we do this for ourselves? And our instructors will help you come up with kind of something similar to this, where you can actually spell it out. They'll give you suggestions on how you can UTM stuff so they coordinate together. So essentially you can build a nifty little report that will ultimately start showing you this stuff. But what I want to show you is in Google Analytics, how you can go forth and do it. So we're going to pull up Google Analytics, and I've got here, let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit, and then we're going to pull up, in this one, I'm going to go to acquisition, I'm going to go to all traffic, and I'm going to go to source medium. It's my favorite report in Google Analytics. Hopefully it will be yours too. So you basically do 2 things in Google Analytics. One we talked about, which was this idea of UTMing, right? So I'm just going to type in Facebook. Actually, I'm going to do CPC because those are the paid ads that we're trying to look for. So we've got Facebook CPC, we've got Google CPC. What I'm going to do then is I'm going to do a secondary dimension up here. And this is something, again, even as a strategist, you should not avoid Google Analytics. So if you're already like, I shouldn't even be in Google Analytics, you can go in Analytics. You don't need to do all the setup and everything if that's not your job, but you should be roughly familiar with where some of this stuff is and how to use these reports, because it'll make it more powerful for you. So I'm going to go back, and what we're doing here is I'm adding a secondary dimension. So I just went into source medium report. I just looked for CPC traffic, which is paid traffic. It's how we're UTMing it. And if you're not doing that, that's step 1. If you just see Facebook referral and you don't see Facebook CPC, work with your vendors and say, hey, I want to use UTM things, and they will help you with that. In our membership site, by the way, even as a Toolbox member, which is our free level, you have access to the traffic tracking toolkit, which will talk all about UTMs and how to do that. So if you need help with that, there are tools back there for you. So what I'm doing is I'm going to add a secondary dimension. And this is something we're going to call the ad content here is the secondary dimension. And this is where you put additional details about specific clicks. So we've got this built out here, and you can see what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a little bit more traffic instead of just the past week. So I'm going to bring up some more traffic, and I'm going to show all of a sudden, you see all these different Facebook CPCs that are here, that are coming through, all these different versions of Facebook CPC. They're there because they have different ad contents. And this is where we put the different details as to helping us understand, helping Google Analytics understand what the point of the traffic was in the first place. So it has a little bit of details around the ad sometimes in it, also tells us what it was for. So we'll put top for kind of our cold traffic outreach, so top of funnel. So these were ads whose job it was to create awareness of the brand. That's really it. They were not designed to create sales. They were just designed to get people to become aware of the brand, as the brand being measurementmarketing.io in our case. So coming into a blog post or hanging around for a little bit, something like that, right? That's what it's for. You can also see that down here where we're saying cold traffic, right? So we have the audience of cold traffic, and that's what it's for. That audience of cold traffic is to make them aware. It's to warm them up a little bit, introduce people that have not otherwise participated with measurement-marketing.io as a brand, to introduce and have them start those little baby steps. And that's how we judge these campaigns, these different ads. So I judge them for that, if it did that. Then we have these retargeting campaigns. So retargeting, we put the word retargeting in there. Now again, why did we do this? This is what you should do as well. That's because I can go to Google Analytics and say, hey, what about the other Facebook ads? So I'm not just asking, how did Facebook, quote unquote, do for me? I'm saying, how did this particular Facebook ad set do? What did this Facebook do? Did this Facebook ad set do its job of awareness, or in this case, of retargeting? And if it's retargeting, it's probably to create leads. So what I would do is I would come up here and say, did this do its job when it comes to retargeting, right? The purpose of retargeting for us, and this is just something that we know because we set all this up, is to create leads. So what I would expect to happen is I could come over here because I have a goal set up already. And again, if you don't have these, this is where you go to your implementers and say, we're gonna have to set this stuff up, and I'm gonna switch it to lead. And now I should see leads being created by the retargeting campaigns and maybe by the other campaigns, but really they're not designed to do that. So here, and this is exactly what happens. So here, if I see retargeting, I've got 63 leads that are being created by the retargeting campaign. So my Facebook spend for this particular ad set is doing its job. It's getting 43% opt-in rate. 63 leads were created by this campaign whose sole job it was to create leads. It wasn't to create sales. Now, if it did, that's awesome, but that is a happy accident. I do not expect that to happen. It's not what these ads are designed for. There's a whole other system that takes leads and then brings them into a sale. And for us, that's email. That's our email series. So email will get credit for that currently. Now, eventually we might start doing Facebook retargeting ads for the purchase of a sale, in which case we would put down here that it's retargeting specifically for a sale of a product. And then we would know, we would be able to measure it against if it created a purchase or not. Did it do its job? You'll see down here, these other ones, these cold traffic ones have not created leads. So do I go, well, Facebook doesn't work for me? No, because that wasn't what it was designed to do. The whole point of this top of funnel was to build the audience so that we could create the leads. And eventually, as we get this audience bigger and bigger and bigger, we can start doing other things, lookalike, et cetera. But for me, the reason that we do this as a strategist for my own company, because I'm not the one building out the Facebook stuff, right? We have our marketing team that does that. But when they're doing that, they're putting in these different UTMs and they're adjusting their UTMs too to make sure it's more useful for us as coming through here. So I can see, okay, this Facebook spend, whatever we spent on this for this stuff, it didn't create any leads, but that's okay. It wasn't supposed to. It was there to create the audience so that we could retarget so we could create the leads. And so all of a sudden you can start to get a better story of if your Facebook ads are actually working or not, because you can use this combination of UTMs, which is a necessary thing. It is not at all optional. So if you're not using UTMs, it just immediately that's what you do. That's your one thing. You start doing UTMs. But very quickly past that, starting to do the UTMs and actually use UTMs is you use them correctly. Specifically, the ad content, which is the UTM underscore content section. Those of you who use UTMs already know what I'm talking about. That UTM underscore content section, that's where you put the differentiators between the different Facebook clicks. So you can tell the difference between how your Facebook ad is working or not. And that in analytics is this. So I can start to see, well, hey, how much did this, Facebook ad set that I did, how much did it create awareness? Well, I could have a goal for awareness. How much did it create for leads? You saw I had a goal for leads, and I can judge that Facebook campaign do its job. And then ultimately, did email, create purchases as we go through there, and I could measure for that. And then I understand how my Facebook traffic is actually contributing to moving the customers through the pipeline as they go through the customer journey that we have. And I start to understand how Facebook does that, how email assists with that, how my Google Ads traffic assists with that, how speaking or podcast traffic or my Google organic traffic, my search traffic helps with that. Because my search traffic probably creates a lot more awareness than it does purchases. And so that's one of those things that as you plan out these structures, especially with paid traffic, because what happens is people spend a bunch of money on paid traffic and then they don't trust the numbers. They don't trust the platform. And I get it, and it's good to be skeptical of that platform because remember, Facebook, the ads manager, it only has Facebook stuff. It can't see your emails working. It can't see your Google Ads working. It can't see Google Organic. It can't see any of that stuff. Only Google Analytics can. So you take Facebook Ads Manager, you go, cool, but the only reason that you get confused is because you're probably just tracking the purchases because that's what that's all you care about is the end result, which I get, and that is natural, and that's where everybody starts, tracking the end result. But it's equally as important, not even not even just a little less important. It is equally as important to track the stages, because when you tie the stage, in this case, awareness or engagement, and then ultimately to purchase, when you tie these stages to the specific ads that are supposed to create those stages, there's very little time between the click on the ad and the thing actually happening. So it's easy to attribute the source of traffic. And then you can start to get stuff that looks like this. That makes it a little bit easier. Now, we did a workshop just really recently, actually, to this one, where it was around using channel reports. You can create channels in Google Analytics to say, I want to see my retargeting channel and how that works compared to my cold traffic channel. And you can actually start to use that channels mechanism in the back here of Google Analytics to actually spell that out too. But you can't do that unless you're using UTMs properly. And you're putting all the different details of these UTMs into this. So the other way to think about this, and this is what I'm going to leave you with as we go to wrap this up, is the other way to think about this whole concept is of farming. So in fact, I was talking to our marketing team earlier about this exact thing. This is how we're measuring for it. So we need seeds, right? That's how I look at it from a farmer's perspective. You need to start with seeds. So to get seeds for us is awareness, these seeds of awareness, right? Individuals that might be interested in one day bearing fruit for the organization, right? That is measurementmarketing.io. But I have to have seeds first. So we do these awareness campaigns to collect seeds, and we track how much that cost us per seed, right? Per click to the awareness goal, which is, pennies on the dollar. But again, it's just awareness. So we can measure for that and see if that stage is working. Then we want to see how many of those seeds sprout, which is when they become a lead, when they start really kind of not just raising their hand saying, maybe I'm interested in your stuff, but they say, hey, here's my email, please send me stuff, right? That's a deeper level of engagement. You've got a better relationship with them. It's how we measure to understand if they're at that point in the conversation with us. And so we have the sprouts, right, where they become leads. Then are they bearing fruit? Right? Have we taken care of them enough? Have we given them enough value where they're bearing fruit, where they're exchanging value now? They're giving us the credit card information for, becoming a member in our case. So that's that sort of stage you can measure across for. And you can do this, and this is where we talk about ACE goals, awareness goals and completion goals and engagement goals along the way. So you set up those different stages of goals in your Google Analytics, and you UTM your traffic sources. And again, if you're not sure how to do that, your vendors are. So as a strategist, I want you to think through this. And if you need help with this, especially if you're a Measurement Marketing Academy member, reach out to the Ask an Instructor support system and say, okay, I kind of got it. I'm like 20% with you, but here's what I'm trying to figure out. Here's what our traffic sources are. Here's what our customer journey is. Help me. And that's all you need to send us. Just create a video that shows us that. Our instructors will take a look at that, and they will create and help guide you to creating something like this, give you some suggestions for UTMs, help you to communicate with your vendors to make sure that you're more than likely getting a report that's just slightly more useful in helping you understand how your own Facebook ads are working. And again, for that matter, Google ads, email traffic, whatever it is. All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and bring this one officially to a close. What was your one thing? Hopefully it was the idea of, okay, we're using UTMs. Maybe it was just that, just using UTMs in general. So start using UTMs. But if you're already using UTMs, there's probably room for you to use them in a way that coordinates things a little better. Taking full advantage of UTMs. Put your content, put in there what the purpose of it was. Was it retargeting for a purchase? Was it retargeting for a lead? Was it just cold traffic to get awareness? Put that stuff back there so you can tell how these ads are working and if they're doing the job you want them to do. Of course, if you need help, like I said, with Ask Instructor support, just reach out to us and we're happy to help you out as well. Now, next week's topic is updates and features. We do this once a month. It's called our What's New. And so we switch from a strategy session, which we're just finishing up today, to What's New, which is next week. And that's really where we're going to go back over the entire month of September. And we're going to take a look at what's changed and what's been released for Google Tag Manager, for Google Analytics, for Google Data Studio, which were some major big things that came out in September. So we're going to talk about all of those next week for Workshop Wednesday. Now, remember, 2 ways you can get that. Of course, subscribe. Make sure that you are getting all of these videos and being notified from them. So just take a moment to go ahead and do that now if you have not already. Also, you need to take a look at the Measurement Marketing Academy, measure.tips/get academy. If you're an Academy member, you already have access to Workshop Wednesday back there. In addition to all of the different courses on Google Analytics and Tag Manager, Data Studio, you've got Ask Instructor support. And for those of you in the Pro Edition, you've got the group coaching. You can actually talk live with instructors and work out this strategy. Because I promise you, there is a strategy. This does not have to be as hard as it is often made. You don't have to keep saying, gee, I don't know how half my advertising works. You don't have to do that, right? There's that famous quote from years ago. I think it was Wanamaker back in the day that said that, where he was like, I know half my advertising works. I just don't know which half. It doesn't have to be like that. Not as much. Not if you switch it to measuring for the different stages of the customer journey. It's a lot easier to do that. So measure.tips/get academy will talk to you probably won't actually talk to you, but it'll show you a page where you can learn all about the Measurement Marketing Academy, what we have to offer you there. And of course, if now's just not the right time to invest, I get it. We have the Measurement Marketing Toolbox, which is our Toolbox membership. You get Workshop Wednesday. You also get a ton of other tools that we have back there, including that traffic tracking toolkit that I mentioned before. That will help you to structure your UTMs. That will give you advice on how to coordinate UTMs back there. So take advantage of that. That is all completely free. It's our way of giving back to the community. Just go to measure.tips/WW to activate your free Toolbox membership, and you'll see where to do that there. Again, measure.tips/WW. And with that, we'll go ahead and officially bring this strategy session to a close. So this just watched strategy session, how to tell if your Facebook ads are really working. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we will see you on the next one. Take care.